Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from the Frontier. Thank you kindly for stopping by. I'm always grateful. We've had a torrential downpour again from early in the morning. The rivers are overflowing here in Nairobi and trees are falling. Pretty dramatic. My dearest Hannah told me, because she was in her running gear, that she has to go cross country today, and she said last Friday it was so wet she fell in the water. Couldn't get herself out, but she got commendation for her netball, and I've been calling her a netball champion last few days, and she's been rather pleased with herself. If you didn't get a chance to watch our Mindspeak last Saturday, well, we've now uploaded the panel discussion, which was between Habil of Kenya Bankers, Joshua of Kenya Commercial Bank, and John Gachora of NIC Bank, and it was a rather fruity discussion, well worth watching and listening to, giving you a deep insight into the state of banking at the moment, which remains quite fluid. I thank the team at Dow Chemical for the invitation yesterday to dinner and the celebration of their 5 years in Nairobi. A number of tweets I did. Dave Govender, who's a friend, head of the East African cluster, said Africa's on the rise and Dow Chemical is on the rise in Africa. They spoke about the success of their TEF molecule in Ethiopia. And Ross McLean, who's the SSA president, said a vision is nothing without execution. I also would like to thank Gabriel Nagatio of the African Development Bank for an outstanding lunch earlier in the week. Home thoughts, let me start with James Baldwin. Talent is insignificant. I know a lot of talented ruins. This photograph is taken by a friend, Johan Borgstam, and it was tweeted by Boniface Mwangi. Elephant apocalypse. This was the burning of the ivory. David Yarrow, there is a great sense of place in this image. Some say that it captures the serenity of East Africa at dawn. And then I went to Daphne Sheldrick. Animals are indeed more ancient, more complex, and in many ways more sophisticated than us. They are more perfect because they remain within nature's fearful symmetry, just as nature intended. They should be respected and revered, but perhaps none more so than the elephant, the world's most emotionally human land mammal, she said. And then this photograph, the thunderstorms build in late October, and this is also the time when the elephant herds can be at their biggest. London's best restaurants according to top chefs. Look at this dish from Ikeda. I like the quality of the fish and I like the simple decor. It is excellent Japanese food without all the stuff that usually goes with it in London. It is pared down. We always have the sashimi and the sea urchin if it is on the menu. This dish is Galician beef at Kitty Fisher's. The Shake Shack mogul loves this Mayfair restaurant where the basement dining room ceiling is so low you bang your head on the lights when you walk in. You wonder what all the fuss is about, Mayor says. But you give up every ounce of resistance when the food is on the plate. And lastly, lobster with chicken quenelles at Alain Ducasse at the Dorchester. The 3 Michelin-starred hotel restaurant is a surprising choice for French chef Kaufmann, who held 3 stars at La Tante Claire, which I went to several times, very good restaurant, before abandoning fine dining in favor of the rustic cuisine of his native Gascony. But a recent lunch at Alain Ducasse's newest space has him reconsidering. I'm not interested in Michelin restaurants anymore, Kaufmann says, but it was the best meal I've had in a year. The lobster with chicken quenelles is perfection. Looks pretty good. Political reflections. It was not my preference to see my term cut short, said Davutoglu. In a televised speech, Davutoglu defended the economic record of his 28-month premiership and swore personal allegiance to Erdogan, with whom he said he shares a brotherhood. My conclusions were that he was so apologetic and humble in what was, after all, summary dismissal. You see his humility in this photograph. That was tweeted. Looks like a sad day for Ahmet Davutoglu. The Independent says Donald Trump will require a miracle to make it to the White House. And I said, a miracle or a terrorist attack? Because you can just imagine there is an attack a few days before the election. He's going to point at it and say, look, I told you so. The security authorities succeeded in their operation against a number of Daesh partisans holed up at a recreational area in Mecca. The state TV station Ekbariya said in a news flash. 4 wanted men were killed in a gun battle. A spate of shootings and bombings have taken place in Saudi Arabia in recent years, primarily targeting the kingdom's Shia minority, whom IS regard as heretics. In another 2-day security operation that ended at the weekend, 2 IS suspects were killed and a third was wounded in southwestern Bisha province. Mecca was the site of one of the earliest armed Islamist insurgencies in 1979, when a group of militants led by Juhayman al-Otaibi took over the Grand Mosque, eventually leading to a siege resulting in more than 100 deaths. I had a very good friend who was an author called Said Aburish, who was very well informed in these matters, and he told me that actually the Saudi Arabians couldn't eject Juhayman al-Otaibi from the Grand Mosque. And of course, the mosque is considered the holiest of holy sites. And the Saudi government called on the French. And basically, said what happened was they converted them all into Muslims, all these 200 or so French soldiers, and then flooded the area and pushed electricity through it, killing a whole lot of people. I'll put up a photograph of the Grand Mosque and the Kaaba in Mecca. Hot air in the desert, a kingdom in descent. Our counterpunch, the kingdom of Saudi Arabia is in financial dire straits. Since the plunge in oil prices, the kingdom has been hemorrhaging money left, right and centre. It has provided billions of dollars to shore up counter-revolutionary governments around the Middle East, especially Egypt. It is heavily involved in the Syrian conflict and is burning through some $6 billion a month, waging war on impoverished Yemen. The country needs oil to be $104.6 a barrel, according to the Institute of International Finance, for its budget to break even. The current price is around $45. Finances have become so tight that from being the second largest importer of armaments worldwide in 2010 to 2014, Deputy Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has said the kingdom aims at sourcing up to 50% of arms from local producers to help diversify the economy. It is as much of a pie-in-the-sky idea as turning Saudi Arabia over the next several years into a knowledge-based economy. There is a liquidity crunch at the banks, and it is the government that is borrowing, so companies are suffering. Kurdish Photo tweeted this cartoon of the Sachs Pico, and looked pretty interesting. Leader of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Kim Jong-un, is captured in this photograph at the military parade celebrating the 70th anniversary of the ruling Workers' Party of Korea in Pyongyang. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has opened the door of his isolated economy a crack to market reforms. Now, as he calls the first Congress of the ruling party since 1980, he faces a choice. Kim has built his grip on power with purges of senior officials and other provocative actions, including 2 nuclear tests. But as North Korea loses most of its Cold War benefactors and struggles from a series of droughts and famines, he's also tiptoed into the realm of private enterprise. Have a look at this graph from North Korea wading through the hard times, measuring GDP in North Korea. I wrote a piece a while back in November 2010 when I spoke about the Hermit Kingdom and how far away in distant lands lies the Hermit Kingdom. They have all had tiny little hands like the elves and the shoemaker. The first and eternal president was Kim Il-sung, and his successor Kim Jong-il, whose designated successor is Kim Jong-un. They have all had tiny little hands like the elves and the shoemaker. Abe breaks Putin's isolation in a rare visit by a G7 leader to Russia. Rare bilateral meeting, marking a breakthrough in Kremlin efforts to end Russia's isolation since it intervened in Ukraine more than 2 years ago. This is yet another indication that Obama's policy of isolation has failed. It's an important visit that shows that Japan has decided not to put all its eggs in one basket. The Japanese leader, key American ally in the Asia-Pacific region, rejected an appeal by President Obama not to go ahead with the visit to Russia. That's interesting. Currency markets, and they're moving around a lot, but when I looked last, 114.20, euro dollar, dollar index 93.68, Japanese yen 106.93, Swiss franc 0.9681, the pound 144.95, the Aussie, which has crumbled of late, 0.7373, India rupee 66.595, South Korean won 1171.90, the Rial 353.62, Egyptian pound 888, and the Rand back above 15.0532. Dollar index, I'll put up a 3-month chart. Look, we broke down through 93, which was really the pivot level, but we're back above it again. So we've got to keep an eye on that 93 level. I think it remains the key to unlocking the next moves in the FX markets. Euro dollar, we got as high as 114.50, bust through that, got up to 116.10 if I remember correctly, back at 114.14. The Europeans might be on the offer side. Commodity markets, it's brave to call the bottom of the commodities rout, says the Rio Tinto chief Walsh, saying that the outlook remains clouded by volatile prices and uncertainty over issues including the US election and Britain's vote on the European Union membership. Pressure remains on prices across all sectors, from metals and energy to agricultural products, while some areas of the economy in China continue to slow. Walsh pointed to excessive trading volumes in Chinese iron ore futures that spurred government intervention. It is far more volatile than we've experienced in the past. In that environment, calling the bottom is a brave move. It will turn, though, as this is a cyclical industry. Iron ore bounced up to £70 a ton, and I said I didn't expect it to stay there. Guess what? Today it's down at $60 a ton. Some people can see a bit of an uptick, and I don't know whether it's hope. You have to look at the fundamentals. Bloomberg Commodity Index, a gauge of returns on 22 raw materials, including gold and copper, has rebounded since bottoming in January, when it sank to the lowest level since at least 1991. It advanced 8.5% in April to a second straight monthly gain. Gold, 1278, I'm putting up a 6-month chart, couldn't resist this headline. If I had a lot of money to launder, I would choose gold, says John Cassara, a former US Treasury special agent. Crude oil, wow, look at this 5-day chart. It's been all over the place. We're back where it all started. I'm bearish on oil, and I think you've got to sell these big spikes. Traders boosted their bets for lira volatility by 67% this week, toward the biggest jump since May 2006. And that's all about Geopolitical. I like this photograph, an eerie scene in Lapland where snow-covered trees look like clouds dropped on the landscape. Interesting piece by Chatham House. Tanzanian pipeline deal reflects Uganda's practical and strategic concerns. Saying that Uganda's Foreign Affairs Minister highlighted the issue of relative costs of the rival routes. The projected cost of the Tanzania route is approximately $4 billion, up to $1 billion less than going via Kenya. Kenya's proposed tariff was almost $17 per barrel, compared to Tanzania's $12 per barrel. Uganda's energy minister has also reported that Tanzania has waived land fees, transit charges, and taxes associated with the pipeline. If true, this is unlikely to be viable in the long term. I'm not sure that's correct. Kenya's options are less promising, and none will lend the country the regional clout that was envisaged in its plans to position itself at the heart of East Africa's oil and gas development. Ongoing talks with South Sudan may yet convince the country to halt its oil exports through Sudan and move through Kenya instead. But this is a high-risk scenario given South Sudan's fragility. Conflict has stopped the flow of oil before. South Sudan is not in a position to put any money into such a project at this moment in time. Uganda's pipeline deal with Tanzania ultimately demonstrates the mutability of East Africa's regional politics. Have a look at this photograph of Tanga I took from the air when I was visiting ARM's clinker facility. And then I was talking about it in the context of ARM, but I think we can apply this to the context of this pipeline. Tanga, I said the first point to note is that it is geostrategic. Most northerly seaport of Tanzania, not far from Mombasa. And I said I have a strong conviction that the Indian Ocean economy is set to enjoy a renaissance and that the world's center of gravity is tipping in that direction. My house was surrounded this morning by police, said Moishi Katumbi on Twitter. This is Kabila's answer to my candidacy for president. Whatever happens, I stand by my application and remain firm in my peaceful struggle for the rule of law. Calls to Katumbi's phone didn't connect when Bloomberg called him seeking comment. He is, of course, a very serious competitor to President Kabila, and I think in a free and fair vote that he has the wherewithal to win it. Congo lays to rest music and fashion legend Papa Wemba. Interesting piece in Reuters, how South African President Zuma, the smiling spy, controls South Africa as head of intelligence. For the outlawed ANC during apartheid, Jacob Zuma neutralized perceived traitors and sidelined opponents to shore up his position, people who worked with him say. Decades later, South Africa's president, he hasn't lost his touch. Lampooned in the media, jeered in public, and now facing calls from inside and outside the ANC to resign over millions of rand of improper state spending on his private home in Kandla. The 73-year-old's grip on power seems like it should be weaker than at any point since his election in 2009. Yet he endures, thanks to skills honed decades ago in the exiled ANC underground, promoting little-known officials who do his bidding to powerful positions within the security and intelligence portfolios. Politicians who work around Zuma say. Zuma, whose Zulu middle name, Gedli Klesa, means the one who smiles as he hurts you. Ronnie Casserel's intelligence minister between 2004 and 2008 under Mbeki says the first people he appointed were his security team. It was vital that Zuma had the heads of intelligence to do his bidding. It gives you the ability to dig up dirt on politicians and keep a close eye on opponents. My conclusions are that South African president has captured the ANC and the Guptas captured the president. 14th of December, I said the markets are simply not interested in President Zuma's explanations. They are seeing a South African president who has gone rogue. South Africa is set to lose its investment grade status if credit default swaps are anything to go by. Cost of insuring the nation's debt against default for 5 years is already higher than some junk-rated countries, including Russia, and just 38 basis points lower than for Brazil. That's the narrowest margin since June, before the South American country was downgraded to sub-investment levels. South African all shares up 2.45% year to date. It's given up some ground. Barclays has raised $876 million by selling a 12.2% stake in Barclays Africa Group. Dollar Rand is back above 15. Great sell with a 14 handle. Egyptian EGX30 up 7.73% so far this year. Nigeria all share down 10.75% so far this year. Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index minus 9.44% so far this year. Interesting article in the New Yorker: shootout in Karamba. Karamba's elephants are a hybrid of Africa's two elephant species, forest and savanna. They have the larger size of savanna elephants and the long straight tusks of forest elephants, making their ivory particularly sought after. In the 1970s, there were more than 20,000 elephants in Karamba. Today, there may be as few as 1,500. Interesting story, talking to the warden at Karamba. He says Karamba lies on the edge of what Marav referred to as a political wasteland, a lawless region abutting Sudan, Congo, and the Central African Republic, where there is virtually no government. The area is subject to raids by the Janjaweed from Darfur, army units and militias from both North and South Sudan, and followers of Joseph Kony's murderous Lord's Resistance Army, the movement that steals, rapes, pillages, and deploys kidnapped child soldiers. Zimbabwe is offering bond notes which are to be introduced over the next 2 months, which will be backed by $200 million provided by the Afrexim Bank. Mangudya also said the bank will convert 40% of dollar receipts from the country's exports into rand and limit daily withdrawals to $1,000. The way the economy responds to notes now is the same way it responded to notes 5 or 8 years ago. So there's not going to be any difference. Mangudya is once again trying to introduce the Zimbabwe currency through the back door. Coming to Kenya, number 8, the poet Dan Mwangi tweeted, Kenya photographer named Commonwealth Photographer of the Year. This is the batting, the photograph of the Maasai playing cricket. Chase Bank reopening. I wrote a piece which wasn't published yesterday about the opening, saying the reopening of Chase Bank, which involved KDIC, the receiver, appointing KCB as the manager under the provisions of sections 44.2b, 44.3 of the Kenya Deposit Insurance Act to carry out the business and manage the assets and liabilities of Chase Bank. That's the press release we got in April. Has to be seen as a win and even a coming of age for the capital markets in Kenya. 167,290 accounts, equivalent to 97% of accounts or 6% of total deposits, have their funds available in full. It was always a national interest issue that so many account holders were not sent to the wall because of the Robert Maxwell antics of the chairman and his cohorts. It was not their fault, and they should not have been made to pay a heavy and even terminal, open brackets, for their businesses, price for the activities of a rogue banker. The faith and trust these account holders put in the institution was a miracle to behold and worthy of further study. I watched the real time all the time, and even as it became clear that things were seriously murky, Chase customers remained bright-eyed and bushy-tailed about prospects. However, as the CEO of Kenya Commercial Bank said at Mindspeak last Saturday, good customer service does not give you the right to steal customer deposits. So I think the central bank governor and his team in KCB deserve a pat on the back for catching the ball and not dropping it, for crafting an indigenous homegrown solution, and for getting the show back on the road. Big ticket savers are now having to appreciate that high and even extreme interest rates should carry a health warning. Billions of shillings are locked, and to date I find it mind-boggling that no one is asking the question, what kind of surveillance were the big depositors deploying? Interbank lines to Chase Bank were cut in December and reliably informed. From that moment it was always one reputation hit away from where it later found itself in April. Given the arrival of mobile money and social media, we are living in a new normal where the velocity of cash in and cash out is essentially off the charts. So it's a big up to the central bank governor and his team, and also for outsourcing the receivership with such dispatch. It shows a speed of thought and execution for which we should all be grateful. I concluded by saying Patrick Njoroge is a change agent and is taking Kenya banking through a portal into a new normal. He is to be commended. Let me put up a photograph of the Chase Bank Group Managing Director Duncan Kabui and the Chairman Zafrula. Put up another photograph of Robert Maxwell because I was tagging Zafrula with the Robert Maxwell. You are as safe with me as you would be in the Bank of England, Robert Maxwell. If things were half as bad as some people persist in believing, I'd have retired with a bottle of scotch and a pistol a long time ago, he said. Business Daily has an article about the ousted Chase Bank chairman, saying he was the architect of the 11 billion shilling loot. Zafrullah Khan, biggest beneficiary of some 11 billion shillings systematically looted from the troubled mid-sized lender. Khan is said to have siphoned the cash to entities he co-owned with suspended managing director Duncan Kabui. He pumped the funds in buying real estate and constructing properties in Nairobi and abroad. When Deloitte probed deeper into the transactions early this year, the duo disguised them as loans dispersed in line with Islamic banking. The auditing firm told a National Assembly committee probing the collapse of the bank. These companies are owned by the chairman. Over 90% of the ownership of those companies was the chairman and 10% was the group MD. This is Frederick Alou, a partner at Deloitte. There was no single documentation to show how the money was advanced from the bank to purchase those properties. Mr. Khan is one of the founding owners of Chase Bank, first appointed group managing director in 2009, later made chairman in 2014. Deloitte had said that the embezzling of 11 billion shillings at Chase Bank had left the lender running on empty, as the heist had wiped out the lender's core capital of 9.6 billion as of December 2015. The central bank has disclosed that it has seized assets worth 7.9 billion shillings from Mr. Khan and Mr. Kabui. Deloitte said a further 3.1 billion was stolen from Chase Bank. The 3.1 billion we also believe was eventually channeled to the chairman. We are looking for those properties as well. The hefty interest-free loans were taken as insider borrowing, and the properties purchased were disguised as musharaka. Some of these properties were already completed and generating income, but none of that income was going to Chase Bank. Mr. Onyango said the ousted chairman had admitted to irregular borrowing and confided in him as follows: "That is a mistake, and we're going to transfer them immediately." And then he came back a week later and said, no, this is Islamic lending. And on the 18th of April, I wrote a piece, Chase Bank and the Story of the Three Wise Monkeys, Mizaru, Kikazaru, and Iwazaru. So then the calculation has entirely changed for audit companies the world over. KPMG threw the Guptas over because of the reputational risk. Deloitte could not put their name to a cacamamie idea. KCB, I wrote on the 25th of April, cuts to the chase. Kenya shilling below 100.5 at a fresh 9-month high. Nairobi All Share minus 0.05% year to date. NSE 20 minus 1.56% year to date. Home Africa has reported a full year earnings per share loss of 91 cents a share. Revenue down 62.2%, 259 million. Gross profit down 89.06%. They are saying the book value of the group's inventory or land bank grew from 2.4 billion in 2014 to 2.9 billion. And they're saying the current market valuation of the group's inventory or land bank is in excess of 6 billion shillings, which is 10 times the market cap. Businessman Jacob Juma was shot dead overnight. Unknown people while driving past Lanar's school Thursday night. Have a look at his Twitter handle, and you'll notice that he was pretty outspoken, so he probably had quite a few enemies, but he also must have had some business rivals as well. Once again, thank you for stopping by. Wishing you a splendid weekend.